Here we are. Oh, I'm coming to the end. Let me return to my fantasy, the metaphor, the journey and all this. I'm Dorothy. You guys are the followers on the yellow brick road. Except instead it's kind of a road strewn with these huge boulders with the shining city of phenomenology radiantly glowing white light in the future up there on the mountain. We're going there. Big ugly stones in the way with sharpshooters and horrible people who want to jump on us and strangle us along the way. We've got through the theoretical ideas, the medical model, which is a killer, which kind of merges into the third one, which is the doctrine of reality with a capital R, which I'm going to finish off with a final example for you guys, and then go on to the fourth one. You'll see what it is in a moment. There's only 4 in the way. There probably are more, but I can't think of what they are. You tell me what they are sometime and I'll modify the thing to include them. Anyway, what's the final story, example, illustration of what I'm talking about? It's actually a story of an interaction between a psychoanalytic psychiatrist in the Midwest, someone I don't know personally, but I'm taking the story from a book I read about psychosis and psychiatric practice and just all the issues that come up in trying to work with people who believe things that are out of line with all that we consider to be objectively, rationally true. So it's in that same territory. This is again in the realm of looking for the subjective truth and how important that is, but how lost on contemporary psychiatry and clinical psychology an idea like this is, which it shouldn't be. It should be kind of the centerpiece, really, if you think about it. It's kind of common sense. Anyway, let me give you the story, and then I'll talk about the principle that it illustrates a little bit more. The story goes like this. A psychiatrist with psychoanalytic background and who writes in that community of scholars is talking about, the context is in an essay he wrote in which he's talking about the difficult challenges that are presented to us by our delusional psychotic paranoid patients, and how the so-called delusion, he uses that word, he doesn't say a so-called delusion, he just says the delusion, may present an obstacle that subverts the possibility of meaningful psychotherapeutic contact. And so the story he's about to tell, which I'm going to recount for you, is an example of how a delusion can intrude into a psychotherapeutic dialogue and destroy all basis for further communication, wreck the therapy, and one has to watch out for that. That's what he's saying, and that's all he's saying. But as you'll see, I don't think he understands what happened to him. So I'm going to offer a different point of view on the process that is described. And I'm going to give you an example of George Atwood's famous virtual therapy. I'm going to interpose myself into the situation and handle it differently and imagine what differently then might have emerged. Okay? First, the real story. You have an aging psychiatrist. He's going to be 55 years old. I'm going to imagine that. It's probably right. And he's walking with a young man, perhaps 26, I'll say, years old, carrying the diagnosis of schizophrenia. Okay? And what does it mean that he carries that diagnosis? No detail is given at all on the case, so you don't really know. But I would assume that if anybody has placed that diagnosis on him, he must have shown the features, like the 4 A's or something like that of schizophrenia. And what that means to me is he is someone for whom the bottom has fallen the hell out. Okay, basically. He's come to the edge of the abyss of annihilation and fallen in. And then you get all these symptoms that are looked upon in that particular way, okay? So I don't know the details, but I'm assuming the psychological disturbance belongs to that class that is the most extreme annihilation catastrophe experiences we can have. So let's just say that that's true. So, but the guy is like functional enough to be able to take a walk with his doctor. So the doctor and the young man are walking together. They're walking along a lane on the hospital grounds. Patient is in an institution where he's hospitalized for a year or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is. And sometimes you take walks with people, and people in so-called psychotic states who suffer from so-called schizophrenia, often it's not a good idea to be outside with them in the outer environment because the stimulation is too confusing and disorienting, disorganizing. You need to be in a small contained space where it's simpler. But in this case, he took a walk with his patient. So imagine them and try to relate to the story I'm telling. If I can do a good job, I hope I can. And imagine yourself like me, floating up above, watching down as these two people dialogue with each other. One of them is a schizophrenic, so-called. The other one's a psychiatrist, so-called. So they're walking along. He doesn't know the patient well at all. He's seen him only a few times. And he's telling this in his essay. Okay, so I'm recounting what he tells us. And this is to show how delusions can destroy therapy. And you've got to watch out for these delusions, because they'll destroy it if you don't find a way to prevent it. The patient says to the doctor as they walk along, "There's a ghost following us." That's just that simple statement. There's a ghost following us. I love it. Just a simple statement like that just floats there. And what does it mean? What does it say? So, a person for whom the bottom has fallen out is taking a walk with a person to whom he, the patient, has turned for help. And he's saying a ghost is following him. Think about what that might mean. Don't come to a conclusion, but just open your hearts to that. Psychiatrists did not do that. Psychiatrist is operating within the doctrine of reality with a capital R. So he asks the following question in response. The patient says, "There's a ghost following us." "Oh? Where is that ghost?" That's the question. Where is the ghost? The psychiatrist is assuming whatever this entity is that the patient refers to with the name ghost must have a location in space. That's an assumption he's placing upon it. I don't know that ghosts have a location in space, but he assumed they did. The patient reacted to this inquiry. Where is that ghost? The patient says, "It's behind that tree, hiding." Imagine you've got two people walking down the lane, and then there's a tree like 20 yards off to the right. It's a big tree. And the patient points at the tree and says, "The ghost is behind that tree." The therapist says, "Oh?" And so then the psychiatrist says, takes the patient by the arm and says, "Come with me," and leads him over to the tree. And the two of them stand there before the tree. And then they, led by the psychiatrist, they circle the tree twice. Okay, they walk around the tree, then they walk around the tree again. Then the psychiatrist turns to the patient and said, "See? No ghost." Then he repeats it. He went around twice, so he repeats it twice. "Do you see? There's no ghost here." Really. Now what would you imagine, based on everything I've been telling you guys about with people, where they get into these states that are so extreme and such disasters and so impossible, and they're generating images and creating things that are their way of trying to come back and all that. What would you imagine the patient would say? Let me imagine some possibilities. Would you imagine, I'm sure you wouldn't if you followed me at all, the patient might say, "Well, thank you for showing me that. I thought there was a ghost behind the tree, but I guess there is no ghost. And, hey, I'm here, and the big R, like, welcome to the big R, let's go get drunk. Let's watch a Mets game. Health. There is no ghost." I want to point something out to you guys, and you have to have been here for another lecture to understand what I'm about to say. But the therapist's approach there was an example of what is known, in the famous words of George Atwood, as backhoe therapy. Are you guys with me on that? Do you know what I mean? That's referring back to a previous case where a patient had believed there was a cavern of assassins beneath the hospital with these evil ninja murderer guys in it that would come out at night and murder all the patients. And a psychiatrist suggested the possibility of digging up the grounds with a backhoe, digging it up actually, to prove to the patient that there were no assassins there, no cavern at all, and like correcting her mistaken viewpoint. in her delusional construction of reality, that saw these persecutors present beneath the hospital. And nobody did the backhoe digging there. And in fact, the idea of that I rejected as preposterous because I anticipated what would happen. Let me just go back to that case a little bit for a moment. My picture is, you can figure out what's going to happen. You can just think it through, and of course, you don't know exactly. It could be this, it could be this, it could be this. One possibility is that the patient digs down into the pit that you've opened up where there's no assassins and finds clipboards and pencils and says, this is evidence, see what it is? Or she says, you've dug up the wrong part, dig up that other part. Pretty soon you've got several acres you have to dig up. And then even then, maybe it's on the other side of the fence. So you know, she might just cling to the idea, no matter what you do. Or she finds the clipboards and pencils, proof, see, this is what they did. Or, like I said, if for some reason it actually destroyed the image she created, you might have injured her terribly, because that's her creative symbol for something going on. That nobody's worrying about what it means. That's what you need to worry about. The most likely possibility, though, if the backhoe therapy had been tried, would be this, and this is what happened in this case of the ghost. The patient would, as soon as you brought out the backhoe, she would turn her back on you and not talk to you anymore. Just not. She knows better than to let you destroy her world, including her persecutory world, which is her way of articulating something she's experiencing. So you can't get to first base by direct contradiction of somebody's delusion. And I'm not saying there aren't times in therapy where people come to an idea and they ask you if it's true, and there might be reasons why you need to say, no, it's not true, and I don't want you thinking that. There might be times where you're going to say that. But in the main, you don't get anywhere with that. You need to understand what it is that is the meaning of what's being said. Okay? So what happened here is that the doctor said, see no ghost, twice he did that. And the patient responded in the following way. He refused to ever speak to that doctor again. Like, fuck you, except he didn't even bother with the fuck you. That's it. And the end of the story. The relationship was disrupted, destroyed. What was the principle that was derived from that by the doctor? What it should have been, I might have screwed up in the way I handled this. He's too stupid. But he wasn't stupid. His IQ was sky high. The doctor, I'm sure, medical school, psychiatry, all this, as smart as can be. He's locked into the doctrine of reality with a capital R. He can't hear what is said about the ghost without comparing it to what he feels, perceives as real. Then he juxtaposes his reality against the patient's and claims his superior. See no ghost, see no ghost. And then the patient shuts him down, shuts him off. Okay? This reminds me of a little bit what happened on a smaller scale with Anna. And I've told you guys some of these stories. I don't know if you can hold on to them or not. How can you? I just told these stories. They're overwhelming to you. They're raining down upon you. You can't remember them. But we had a certain point where she was telling me I was sending rays out of my eyes, getting in her brain, turning her brain to solid substances and killing her and all this stuff. And I said, no, it's not. No, it's not. You're making up science fiction. I was talking to her like that. And she would flip around in her chair and not talk to me, but she'd give me another chance. She knew my heart was good, so she'd give me one more chance the next time around. But it was a kind of a small-scale version of the same thing. What the patient will do if you destroy their symbol is turn away from you so that you can't take even more from them. And it's good that they do that. It's protective. This therapist was never able to get back with this patient. What was the lesson he drew from it? You got to watch out for these horrible paranoid delusions that people have. They can destroy, subvert, cancel out the possibility of a healing dialogue of any kind. So watch it. That was it. How stupid is that? I don't need to be told that. Of course you're going to run into problems or you can destroy the dialogue and all. So then I imagine, what would I do with this patient? I read this story on a plane once. It's boring what the context is, but I was on the way to, where was I going? Chicago, to a conference. And I was looking for extra clinical material, and I was able to use this. And I was reading the book on the plane, reading about this essay. And so then I fantasized putting myself into the situation and being that doctor that walked with the patient. And here's what I would do, or would hope I would be quick enough, smart enough, and subtle enough to do if I were the therapist, analyst, psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever, on that walk. And the same thing occurs. And it's a little hard to explain, but I'll just listen to me as I kind of rattle on about it, and hopefully it will be clear. So here comes George and the patient. We'll call him Tom. And so, hey Tom, let's take a walk today. We're sitting inside, the hospital's stuffy, the air conditioner's not working, let's check out the scene outside. Tom says, all right. So we go out on the walk, and we're walking down the lane, and he says to me exactly what he said to a psychiatrist: there's a ghost following us. Here's my reaction. The first part of the reaction is inward. This is phenomenology operating here. This is another example of phenomenology. What's he talking about? I ask myself. I don't say to him, what are you talking about? People say things, they can't explain what they're talking about. You know, I would ask Anna what she was talking about all the time, and she'd look at me like I was a lunatic and start screaming at me. But still in all, you wonder, what is he talking about? I don't know what he means by that, but I'm wondering that. There's a ghost following us, following us, following us. My response to him in being asked about, or being told about this ghost, will and should depend upon my understanding of what it means that he has a ghost following him and us. I can't just look at the surface of it and say there's a ghost following us. That's what the other doctor did, just the surface. He looks at the literal content. I don't know what he imagines. There's some kind of supernatural nebulous being floating along right behind. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? We'll go look and see it's not there. It's garbage. It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing how bad that is, what he did. It's embarrassing that he would write about this and disgrace himself, as far as I'm concerned, as a person who has any human understanding at all. But in the meantime, what does it mean? Here are the thoughts that come to me about it. I'm standing there, or I'm walking along with him. He says there's a ghost following us. I just hear those words. And I ask myself, who or what is this ghost? I don't ask the patient. I ask myself what it might be. I want to come to a hypothesis. I can't know for sure. I can't read his mind. But I might be able to infer, guess, speculate about what it could be, and then perhaps out of that would come an idea as to how to respond to it that would protect my connection, such as it was with that patient. So here's the thought that comes to me. Maybe the ghost is the patient himself. Maybe what he's doing in a little bit of an indirect way, kind of externalized out of himself, is telling me about how he experiences his own selfhood as a ghost, as a being that scarcely is even there, as something nebulous, insubstantial, something floating along, but it might be real, it might not be real. Maybe it's a feeling of his own unreality. It's following us. Maybe the deepest and most essential part of this young man's self-experience is one of unreality, insubstantiality, ghost-like nebulousness, nebulosity. Is that a word? Okay, maybe that's it. Where do I get that? I know that so-called schizophrenics often feel that way. They don't all feel that way. But I know people for whom the bottom has fallen out lose the sense of their own reality. And maybe all that's left is a ghostly feeling of being a kind of spirit, the phantom that comes and goes and might just disappear into nothing at all. So then this is my thoughts, not my reactions with him yet. I'm hoping I can think of something real quick to answer with this, because this asks for an answer. You want to answer it some way. So, and then I'm thinking also, if the ghost is following us, and if the ghost is essentially what this young man experiences himself to be, it's kind of a positive sign that the ghost is following us. In other words, he's not just in a complete false mode, disconnected utterly from what he really feels and kind of mechanically giving me what I want, perhaps, kind of a Langian false self response. He's telling me there's something nebulous, insubstantial, something not really completely real, but it's with us, it's alongside us, and it might be him. That's what I'm thinking. So what would be my response to that? Well, based on this idea, I might say the following. I don't know if I'd be smart enough, fast enough to come up with this, because I've thought about this a long time before I came up with this idea. I thought I might say this. I'd say, Tom, I want to tell you something. A lot of people in this world do not believe in ghosts. I'm not one of them. I think they're real. That's what I would say. That's it. And it would be based on the following idea, that if I say that, if I'm right in my speculation that he's talking about himself, then I'm saying he's real. And I might be using his language, his metaphor, but it might be a powerful communication. And I don't know how else I would say it, but I would want to celebrate the fact that the ghost was with us. And I don't know how I would say this to him. I wouldn't say I want to make friends with that ghost. I wouldn't say that. It's too easy, too logical, too rational. But I want to convey the feeling that it was a wonderful and terrific thing that this ghost was coming along with us. And by God, we should. Good ghosts are the greatest things in the world. Is what I would say. Okay. The other therapist, what does he say? There is no ghost. No, see, no ghost, no ghost. Maybe what the therapist is doing is annihilating this young man. Wouldn't it make sense then that if that were true, that he annihilates the young man? The young man's existence, such as it is insubstantial, ghostly kind of thing. So if you say there is no ghost, you just wipe him out. So then of course he's going to shut you out. He's not going to let you do that. People will fight for their being in whatever way they can. Here's what I think would happen if I were to say, I believe in ghosts. I actually don't know what he would say to me, but I don't think the dialogue would end. He wouldn't refuse to talk to me. Why would he? Now, I could be wrong about my theory. It runs through my mind. Because it could be that the ghost is not in his phenomenological world. See, I would know this too. I would know it's tentative. Phenomenology is like that. You're always provisional, tentative. You just don't know. So you try something out, and then if it's confirmed by what happens, then you know you're doing good. If something else happens, then you know you're on the wrong track, so you correct for it. It's quite possible that the ghost he's talking about is a persecutor. I didn't hear it that way. I heard it as a symbol of him and his insubstantiality and derealization is the word that is used. The feeling of being unreal is called derealization. It's just a word that means you fall into the feeling of being unreal. But the ghost would be a symbol of his selfhood. But maybe it's a persecutor instead. What kind of persecutor? Well, maybe it's like a kind of condensation of all the mean, horrible, destructive, insulting, vicious things that have ever been said and done to this person. Sometimes what people will do is take all the traumas they've ever had in feeling attacked by other people and condense them into a single persecutor, and then fight a battle with that persecutor, hallucinate its presence, hear the mocking, killer, insulting voices coming at them and all of this. And so you have to fight against that persecutor and help them defeat the persecutor and kind of come back to themselves more powerfully. So it could be that too. And if it is, when I say I believe in ghosts, I'd be on the wrong track. But I don't think I would destroy the dialogue between the two of us, because that ghost too would be real. It would be the real representation, believed in by him as literally, physically present perhaps, of the things that had hurt him so terribly. Again, now if that second possibility were true, the psychiatrist said, see, no ghost, no ghost, no ghost. It's just a complete invalidation and wipe out of the person's reality. So that's another instance of the same kind of thing, isn't it? Now let me, I think I wrote something on the board up here. Let's see if I can put it up there. Delusion, quotation marks. What is a delusion? The standard definition of the concept of delusion has two parts to it. It's a belief that is false. The falsehood of the belief is established by comparing with objective reality. You can't declare anything a delusion without embracing the doctrine of reality with a capital R. Because the falsehood, it's not false to the patient, obviously. The patient clings to the idea that it's true. So we declare it false, we pronounce it false because it doesn't fit in with what we believe and assume to be true. So that's part one. Part two of a delusion is that it's clung to in spite of all contrary evidence and logic and argumentation. So whatever argument you present, whatever counter evidence you present, the idea is still clung to. Those would be the two defining features of a delusion. But if you come to a person phenomenologically, you don't compare what they're saying is true to what you think you know to be true. You can't help but compare what they say is true with what you feel is true. You're aware of that. But you don't elevate your own position to an absolute and then declare the other person false. You just live with the difference. This person is claiming something is true that doesn't fit into the world as I understand it, but it does fit into the world as he or she understands it. So I have to just accept that. Then you try to figure out what happened in this life, that this truth that the person presents you that they believe in has come to be perhaps the central truth of their lives. That's what it is. So what a delusion would be, and we need another word for it. How about just absolutist beliefs? Any absolutist belief can't be contradicted by contrary evidence. So any absolutist belief would be technically a delusion, but I'd like to get rid of that word completely. It's rooted in the doctrine of reality with a capital R. There's no doubt that people come to ideas that conflict with ours, that they cling to with tremendous power. So what do you do when they present them? When they say there's a ghost, when they say there are assassins under the cavern, when they say rays are coming out of your eyes and they're going into my brain, or when they say I am Jesus Christ, or I am the Son, I am the incarnation of the Holy Trinity. That's my patient grace from abyss of madness. So what do you do with all that? Well, the patient often will present the clinician with what they believe and hold to be passionately true as the most central thing in their world even. Sometimes they'll even accompany that with the demand, do you believe me? Am I true? Is it true? Am I sick? All this kind of thing. What I call the Cartesian crunch. What are you going to do with that? So in a way you have two choices. You can say, this is bullshit, what you're telling me. One wouldn't use those words, which are insulting and disparaging, but you might say, I think you're mistaken. It would be better if you just would say it's bullshit, actually, because you're just rejecting it out of hand. But if you do that, you're saying no ghost. You're digging up the grounds and showing no cavern, no assassins. You're stripping the person of the symbol, or you're trying to. And what's going to happen is you're going to hurt them real badly if they're not smart enough to just shut you out, which is mostly what they would do. Now, another possibility would say, no, I do believe you, I agree with you, yes, this is happening. But the problem is, if you don't understand what they mean, what the symbolic, subtle meaning might be in the whole thing, the subjective truth, if you just listen to the concreteness of it, and you say that yes, you believe them, and they're telling the truth, they'll look in your eyes and see that you're a liar. Nobody is more sensitive than a person for whom the bottom has fallen out. You might think they wouldn't be sensitive, but they are. They're like hyper alert, generally. And every subtle nuance of your verbal and nonverbal communication is not lost upon them. And if you claim to believe something that you don't believe, they'll see that you're playing games with their mind. And they'll flip it. It would be better if you just tell them it's bullshit than tell them you believe something you don't. So those are the two alternatives. Yes, I believe you when you don't, which gets you in trouble. No, I don't believe you, which destroys them. What are you going to do? Well, the idea of subjective truth gives a third alternative. Because it means that you can listen to the idea that the ghost is there and hear it metaphorically, symbolically. No, it's quite real to this person. Here's what you don't say. You don't say, I know it's real to you. Watch out for that. I've seen this again and again. Some therapists think they understand the point I'm making. They don't get it. They think it means you should say, well, in your reality, yes, this is happening in your reality. What a patient will believe and feel and know when you say that is they'll kind of fill in the blanks. And in your reality, you pathetic, poor, psychotic, fucked up person, this has realness to you. I do see that. But in the real reality, the capital R, this ain't so. So you can't say, to you it's real. That's never, never, never say that. Subjective truth doesn't lead you to that. It leads you to see what they're getting at. That's what you need to do, that there is a meaning. There's a phenomenological meaning. It's embedded in the depth and richness of all the person is experiencing. And if you could figure out what it is, it will tell you what you need to do. With Anna, with regard to the killer assassins, I didn't have to say, yes, there are assassins under there, and they're coming out at night, and they're strangling, they're garroting the patients, or they're cutting their throats, and they're masturbating them, and then cutting their heads off. I didn't have to say all that. I just had to say, I know it's true, death is everywhere. I kind of stayed a little bit at a slightly more abstract and symbolic level with her, but I was able to validate the heart and soul of what I thought I had hypothesized she was talking about. The feeling of being annihilated by the medical model. I can't imagine anything worse, really, than being somewhere whose life circumstances have been such as to have the bottom fall out, so you don't even know who you are anymore, or even that you are, perhaps, and then have a kind of clinical medical staff supposed to help you view you as a schizophrenic, which means see you as somebody intrinsically, neurologically distorted and diseased and defective and so on. I thought that's what she was talking about. And then I realized I had fed into that myself. And what she needed more than anything else was a kind of validation of the destructive effect of my own lack of understanding of her. That's all it really was, and that was the key. So there's going to be something like that each time. My example of the ghost is the same deal. That's a made-up story, not a real one. I don't know what would have happened. Who knows what would really happen? But I like to make up stories, and sometimes I tell myself I'm actually learning from my imagination, because I'm probably right in what I'm thinking as to what the response would be. I imagine getting along with this young man, Tom, really well. We're walking along, and the ghost is with us, and good, I hope there is a ghost. If there are more ghosts, bring them on. Let's do it. Because he's telling me about something essential about him. I want to create a space with him in which his imagination can work, even if his imagination is preoccupied with just generating symbols of his own absence. A ghost could be something absent rather than present. That's fine. You've got to make room for the absence. Okay, so you have that. So what else? Is there anything else up here? No ghost, no ghost. Watch out for no ghost. The school of thought that believes in no ghost is evil. So the school of thought that believes welcome to the ghosts is the good one. Okay, good and evil, isn't it? Now, so let's imagine we're back on the road now, okay? You guys are like the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and all this, and I'm Dorothy, and we're leading the way. And we finally got past this huge, big, ugly thing that is there, all these no-ghost types all up there with sharpshooters and bow and arrows and crossbows and big knives to stab us. We got past those guys. What horrible guys they are. And so we think we're finally free and clear. We'll get up to phenomenology. Uh-oh, there's another immense boulder there. And I have some stories to tell you today. I don't know how it's going to go over with you, and I don't have them organized very well in my mind, so I'm just hoping that if I hold forth, something will flow out of me that will make sense to you in what I'm talking about. The fourth boulder in the way has the words moral judgment written on it in giant black letters. Moral judgment. That this would be, again, remember, each boulder is something that makes it difficult to develop a phenomenological understanding of something that someone gives us or shows us or presents to us, something we encounter in the world of those we are looking at and needing to make sense of, and if we can, make a difference to, kind of help in some way. So what's involved there? Just this, that there are certain things that people do, show, express, feel, that produce in the observer, including the clinician, the psychoanalyst, psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker, whoever the clinician is, a kind of reaction of moral judgment. And it can really be positive or negative. I'm going to concentrate on the negative, but the positive interferes as well, where you're carried away with what's being given to you as being wrong, bad, objectionable, if not downright evil. Okay? And to the extent that we fall into that kind of a judgmental attitude, wrong, bad, evil, and so on, this walls us out from understanding the phenomenological meaning of what we're talking about, what we're looking at. You can't simultaneously be in a place of sitting in judgment on someone and at the same time go deeply into the meaning, the life historical context, the kind of whole world that is expressed in whatever it is we're given. I want to give some killer examples of this if I can. So I was thinking about this earlier today, in the last couple of days, what I wanted to talk about. And I thought maybe a good example of something that's really hard to study, hard to understand, hard to approach phenomenologically would be pedophilia. Pedophilia means sexual love of children, basically. Okay? I wrote the name of a book on the board here somewhere on pedophilia. It's spelled in this book with an A-E, but normally we do a P-E-D. It means love of children. Pedophilia means the Latin roots, love of children. Okay? What's involved in pedophilia? Well, it's like a broad field where adults become sexually involved with children. There are all kind of variations and so on, and there are terrible sadistic monsters who torture and mutilate and sexually abuse children and so on. But there's a whole other range where it's not like that, but there's an passionate intensity of sexual attraction, repeatedly enacted and so on, with children. So this is the part I'm not sure how to talk about exactly. I wrote on the blackboard 3 features of the kind of so-called pedophilia that I want to concentrate on. Okay? I don't want to talk about sexual murderers of children. Jürgen Bartsch is an example of that. That's an assigned essay for you in the second half. I haven't posted it yet on resources, but it'll be there. Let's not go there yet. I might talk about that a little bit later on today. But just pedophilia itself, what am I talking about? I'm talking about Jerry Sandusky, basically. Maybe you guys know who that is. That's the Penn State coach under Joe Paterno, who recently has caused a huge scandal, got Paterno fired, got the president of Penn State fired, and got himself in huge hot water under charges now about molesting young students and young boys is what it is. What's involved here? So, well, something like the following. I wrote 3 features on the board, 4 features actually, that would characterize people like Jerry Sandusky. He might not be a perfect example of what I'm talking about, but this is, in terms of all I've experienced in this area, it goes something like this. These would not be the sadistic murderers and so on. This would be the molesters that you read about, hear about, and so on. 1, sexual contact with children. A driving desire, repeatedly enacted, to have sexual contact with children. That's it. And when I say children, young children, they will say, I don't know what age, I don't know. Young teenagers, 8-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, whatever. We don't have to nail it down exactly. That's one real important feature. A driving desire, repeatedly enacted, to have sexual contact with children. What the contact involves is variable as you can be, from full-scale vaginal, anal intercourse in boys and girls and so on, to just touchy-feely, whatever, and kissing and whatever, and oral sex and whatever, just a whole range of things. Just let's not nail it down, okay? That's 1. Second, a stunning, amazing lack of sensitivity on the part of the molesting pedophile to the assaultive, intrusive, traumatizing, damaging aspect of what they're doing to their victim. They don't see this as a victimization. They don't see it as inflicting trauma at all. It's like just astounding. There's like 0 awareness and sensitivity to any harm that might be done by this. It's very, very important, because great harm is done by this. It's one of the ways that you can really destroy a child's innocence, leave them with a trauma that will haunt them all their lives. The pedophile does not think of that ever, ever. It's a feature of the phenomenology of pedophilia to be oblivious to doing any harm. Not only, actually I should add something up here. I don't know how to put this on my list of items. Not only are you not doing harm, you're giving something. As a pedophile, my understanding of it is that you really feel you're giving a gift to a child when you become involved with them in this way. Okay? And it's an astounding contradiction then, being someone as a therapist who's worked with many victims of pedophiles, to see the complete disconnect between what you think you're doing and what it means and what you're offering, the gift you're offering, and what really happens to a child as a result. Thirdly, I have written here, refining a glorious childhood bliss and joyful sexual union. The idea is this, that the form of pedophilia, which maybe is the most common one there is, that I'm talking about, involves a kind of fantasy that is believed in as true, emotionally true, if not literally true, that in connecting with children, including passionately and sexually, that one becomes a child again oneself. One regains, reclaims, relives, re-enters the paradise of childhood. So that seems to be a really important feature. And I think that fits Jerry Sandusky really closely, because he's a perpetual child. Although he's almost as old as I am, he's only 6 or 7 years old emotionally and still wants to live in that world. Now, what do they have the fourth one? Oh, zero self-insight. It kind of goes with number 2. Number 2 was there's no sensitivity to the damages being done, but there's also no sensitivity to the meaning of the action itself is a kind of an unconscious enactment where you don't have any self-doubt, any self-reflection, maybe I shouldn't do this. What does this mean that I'm doing this? Like a really serious pedophiliac person never has that thought. It never comes up at all. And if you ask them, what about your sexual interest in children? They don't know what you're talking about. They've never thought about it. I saw an interview with Jerry Sandusky in which he was asked, are you sexually attracted to children? He wasn't able to answer it. I'm attracted to children. Children are great. I love children. I like to touch children. Am I sexually attracted to children? He hemmed and hawed, and finally he kind of said, well, no. Even though he was caught having anal sex with one of his own young people in the gym, in the shower at Penn State, okay? Now, it's very disturbing. There's one part of me with pedophilia, which I can relate to. I don't know how you guys feel about all this, but there's a part of me that says, I know what should be done with pedophiles. Take them and shoot them. Shoot them, kill them, hang them, destroy them, chop them up, and feed them to the fish, right? Is what I say. It's like, and why do I say that? Because my heart breaks when I think of the injury to the children that is taking place. I feel like children are a sacred area, and anybody who abuses children sexually or otherwise should be killed. That's what I feel. I feel it's evil. That's the moral judgment right there. You can't not be a human being. You have to have a reaction to this. It's horrible what goes on. But on the other hand, I think it's important to be a phenomenologist and to be a life historian, researcher, who tries to understand the meaning of what something is. And since this is really, it's not that uncommon, so-called pedophilia, child molesters and all this, people who become sexually interested in children. It's everywhere. I wouldn't say it's everywhere, not every person, but it's all around us, isn't it? And it falls within the circle of what is human. And if we just say we should kill them all, then we're kind of defining them as outside the circle of the human. We got rid of them. But they are human, and they came to this for human reasons. Now here's a feeling I've had. I've tried to do research on pedophilia. I've tried to do as much reading as I can. And I've been really terribly unsatisfied with what I've read. Because I feel like nobody knows what's the recipe for a pedophile. What is it that happens in a human life that leads a person to this particular pattern of experience and action? Not just experience, not just attraction to children, you act upon it as well. Okay? There are some people with just the experience. Maybe they are child pornography freaks and addicts and so on. So you're getting there a little bit. It doesn't necessarily pass over into actual action with children. So a friend of mine from California wrote me a letter and said, I've just found a new book that is the definitive masterpiece on pedophilia. Here it is, On Pedophilia, written by a guy named Shania. He's Italian. This is a recent translation of his book. I was really excited because I'd never read anything good on it at all. And so I ordered it from Amazon, and it cost me about $65, and there was only 2 left in the thing and so on. But still, I got it. Oh, good. Started reading it. And what's it about? It's about the horror that pedophiles inflict upon their victims. It falls into the same problem as all the other literature I've read. It's like people study this and write about it, but they become fascinated by the damage that is done, and they don't understand the damager, perpetrator. And you need to come to the perpetrator with a question. Who are you? What happened to you? What transpired in your life and life history? What was your childhood? That it brought you to this as the most important, compelling necessity of your, or at least one of them, of your whole existence, that you become involved with children in this way. So even this book on pedophilia isn't any good, is what I think. I looked all through it, looked at case histories and so on. It's just garbage. But I mentioned it anyway, because you're not going to find anything better than this or more detailed than this. So I'm not suggesting you get it or read it. There are no copies left on Amazon anyway. But whatever. But what is going on with them? And I think I'm going to make it a cool question of the week for this. I'm going to put it in there in a day or two. Here's what I think, without knowing the details, but I'll give you some clues and hints of how I think about it. No one is born a pedophile. A pedophile has no genetic component. I was looking on Wikipedia on pedophiles and causes and all this, and that's all kind of garbage more or less, but I was just looking to see what people said about it. All kind of theories that it's genetic predispositions and all, that's all garbage. Just don't even look at that. That's not worth anything. There's no empirical substance to that whatsoever. Talk to a serious geneticist that will laugh you out of the room about a thing like that. Here's what's obvious to me. Something has happened in the early life of the future child molesting pedophile. Okay? Something happened to Jerry Sandusky. Okay? What happened was a catastrophe. What's the exact nature of that catastrophe? I'm not sure. Something has to, because ordinarily a person just would never, never, never go near this kind of thing. We are protective of children. Our sexuality is sort of for the adult world. You like young people, old people, middle-aged people, or whatever, you don't go after little kids. You just don't. So if you do, something's happened to you to shape you and shift you in that direction. I'm going to put a question up that asks you to think about what is it. You can try to look up the answers on Wikipedia or something. You're not going to find any. Nobody understands it. Why do we not understand this? It's because people hate pedophiles so much, nobody studies them. You have to, in a way, this is going to sound strange, you have to get into a sympathetic attitude toward them. Empathetic, sympathetic, not excusing them for what they do, I wouldn't say that. But you have to discover the human meaning. You have to imagine your way into a world, into a life, into a child's development and a teenager's development, where it would make sense that this would become the most important thing. Now here's another thought that comes to me, just a memory. How many experiences have I had clinically working with pedophiles? Hardly any. Want to know why? They never come for therapy. They don't think anything's wrong with them. They just go about their business. And if they get caught, the courts might force them in. But they never, never come for therapy. That is part of the thing itself. A complete obliviousness that there's any issue that needs to be corrected, any problem that needs to be addressed, forget about it. The rest of us have all kind of problems. We go for therapy for it. I've had 25 years of therapy, not for this, thank goodness. But pedophilia, you just don't see them. So my experiences with pedophiles have been with the parents of people who have been their victims. And I have a story to tell you that involves one of those people. If you look at the essay, which you're supposed to do before the midterm, and I just know you guys, you're lazy, good for nothings, just like I was, and you're waiting until the last minute to read things, so okay. So I'm not putting you down, I put myself down too. Shattered World Psychotic States, the third case that's given, the third major section of that article, talks about a woman whose father went after her from age 2 to age 13, and came in a couple of times a week for oral sex with his daughter, like literally hundreds of times over all those years, and really did a number on her mind and body. He was not aggressive, he was loving, he was never assaultive or hurtful or sadistic or anything like that. It was gentle, 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 but it was always, always, always just oral sex, oral sex, oral sex, where she would provide it and he would receive it. And it would only take a few minutes, and it was their special time that they had together. And it tells the story in the article of how at a certain point in her development, she started talking about it happening a bit with a friend, and so he had to take her aside and get her to be quiet. And he explained with the following idea that, listen, honey, she was 6 years old at this time after having told a friend, and it started to blow open, but he managed to close it down completely. He said, listen, honey, when they were on the way to church, okay, it's like a hidden life in a family that is so outside what it appears to be, and people can be like that, and don't ever think you know anybody. There might be some weird stuff going on. The fact that the lawn is mowed and the cars look nice doesn't mean they're not doing business on their children at night. So watch out. Watch out. Never assume anything. Um, his family was like that. Her father was like that. Anyway.